Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 11 story, The Ghost Monument, written by Chris Chibnall and is directed by Mark, I believe his last name is pronounced Tondera. I could be wrong on that. This is the 13th Doctor's first story set within, presumably the future, but it's definitely a space sci-fi adventure at the very least, coming from right after the cliffhanger of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, where the Doctor and her companions were trapped in space as she was trying to find her TARDIS. This story was the first to introduce the new Doctor Who intro, as the previous episode didn't actually feature the Doctor Who intro. So this was actually, that was quite unique. The second episode within the Doctor's narrative is the one that introduces the new intro. Pretty cool stuff. This is also a story that ends a sort of mini story arc, going right off to World Enough in Time, from the Doctor's Falls to Twice Upon a Time to The Woman Who Fell to Earth to the Ghost Monument, where those stories happened back to back to back to back to back. In the chronology of Doctor Who, they each episode leads into one another, and this is the end of it. So technically, if you want to be fussy, it could be a 5-parter. That's very amusing if that's the case. But anyway. This is a story which is a very unique in the concept of Doctor Who, where the story isn't structured like any other Doctor Who story which has previously appeared. There have been episodes where the Doctor has had these kind of adventures, but never a full-on story about them. The most closest thing I can think of is the final episode of The Pyramid of Mars, where the Fourth Doctor and Sarah would go and have these little trials, these different trials that lead them to the Eye of Horus. Here it's something very similar, where they get interlaced with a competition. This intergalactic game, and they have to compete in different challenges, shall we say. And there's no real villain. There is a villain of sorts, but he only has 2 very small scenes. And that is quite interesting. It's a story which, it's just a very oddly structured story as well, as we'll get onto it. Even the Wikipedia is kind of confused, because it lists on the TARDIS Wikipedia, it lists one of the main villains. It lists the main villains as these things that appear in the episode, but then clearly they're not the main threat. They're clearly a big part in the episode, but they're not a big threat in terms of the larger scope of the story. It's very strange like that. It's very strange. I think I would have preferred it as a traditional story when it was released. When this story came out, this was the only story in Series 11 which, when it aired, I did struggle to find a common ground with. I thought that the Times editing was a bit off, and I wasn't a fan of this structure of the episode to begin with, where it's like, okay, first they're fighting these monsters, then they're fighting these monsters, and then they're fighting these monsters, and it's the story is less a main narrative and more of little narratives, little story beats that happen throughout the story as they team up with 2 other characters that they befriend along the way. And it should have been longer. This episode should have been longer. I think we all agree. A lot of people didn't like this episode, feeling it was a very weak second entry into the 13th Doctor's timeline. And I stated myself in this video that when I first watched it, it didn't hit me. The second time I watched it was actually, I was like, oh my god, I actually really enjoyed the story. I actually had a lot of fun with this. But this is my 3rd viewing. So I've had that initial, and then I've added that, actually, there's actually a lot to like here. But the 3rd viewing, man, is when you know what's happening, you know what's coming. And you can predict and you can prepare yourselves. And if that's when the story really needs to hit you on your 3rd viewing. Personally, I think the 3rd viewing is almost as important as the first viewing. That's really weird to say, isn't it? But yeah, First of all, the first 10 minutes of the episode is... should I talk about the intro? The new intro. The new intro... Let's talk about the new intro. It's in a style of the 70s Doctor Who with the weird swirling patterns. Only there's a lot more about oomph to it. There's a lot more... as almost as if it's violently attacking the screen. I love the opening of it where you hear the beat of the theme come in and you can see this little ball of liquid energy sort of coming into screen, and then it bursts as the theme song blasts. This is actually a very unique version of the Doctor Who theme song. This is actually a kind of theme song which was wanted when Doctor Who would have returned back in 1990 for Sylvester McCoy's next series, which never happened, in which instead of recomposing new music in the style in the original Derry, Derbyshire and Ron... Oh, sorry, the names on the top of my head, the original composers of the thing, they actually kind of remixed the original theme song using actual soundtracks from the actual first score and mixing it with these strange, ominous sounds. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's actually it's probably my favourite intro of the revived era of Doctor Who. Like, if you compete in from Eccleston onwards, I think it's the best intro. Maybe when you consider the TV movie and then the classic Doctors, maybe it doesn't hold that much in my eyes, but, you know, there you go. So anyway, back up to the episode at hand. As I was saying, the first 10 minutes of this... Okay, maybe it's not 10 minutes. 5 minutes of this episode, where we see these two ships. We see one ship, anyway. They save our characters in the middle of space, or at least it saves two of them, as we see Ryan and Graham being saved by one ship with their hold by this woman, Anne Strong, played by Susan Lynn, and the Doctor and Yaz being saved by Esbzo, played by Sean Doodley. And the camera directing in this, the absolutely amazing work, that shot where Yaz comes out of the stasis pod and the camera swirls around them, going around the ship, seeing the view of the screen. They're making up these hatching these plans as the camera follows through them, and it's a very entirely very tense shot, and it's all taken in what appears to be one shot, with only a few cuts, and when that gets to that moment where it's like, right, we've got to jettison the back of the ship, and you actually see the ship with the camera, like, with a handheld, so it's got that really realistic feel to it, being released. And then we see the ships crashing. That shot, that absolutely stunning shot of like the characters walking, and you see the bright light, clearly the ship coming down. Absolutely gorgeous. There is, with this episode, there is this kind of strange quality with the characters here, which I think is a element of why certain people didn't connect to these characters as much. As this is our characters' our main companions, their first interaction into deeper space of Doctor Who. They've had a small alien encounter in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, but here now they're on an alien spaceship, they're on an alien planet, they have no idea if they can get home or not. And Ryan and Graham, they're surprised, they're thrilled about this, and they're also, you know, shocked and scared. But it doesn't seem as much as you would expect these characters to be. Of course, mainly the beat of the story is to have fun and enjoy the story. But like, if anyone else was in their position, they would be scared out of the hell. With the exception of course, Yaz, because she is teaming up with the Doctor, and she has this kind of authority figure to her that we've seen in police scenes in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and so that, I think, it doesn't affect her that much in terms of these scenes. But Ryan and Graham, those scenes are very strange, and their dynamic is more about him wanting Graham wanting Ryan to call him granddad, despite the fact that Grace has passed away, as a more of like a tribute thing, and more of just trying to get their family the connection on with Ryan. Sorry, he struggles to find this beat, and that seems to be the emotional hook of our main characters for Graham and Ryan in these scenes. The Doctor is also kind of into like learn herself, and she's getting used to new sonic screwdriver. I really like the whole thing she does with the arms. Her interactions with other characters, with Armstrong and Espo, are absolutely fantastic. Let's get on to these two characters. They are part of this World Galaxy tournament where thousands of people have entered, and now it's only them two near the end of this race, and they take our characters because they thought at first that they were some sort of trophy, some sort of reward system for the game. But according to Leon, played by Art Malik, fantastic actor who only makes a few scenes, but he really makes those scenes impactful, and he's essentially the main villain who's organized these games. As he stated, I think he states in the episode, he was the first one. He created the games. He was in the first one, and he won the games. It's to prove your survival, and whoever wins it gets basically money that can support your entire family for the rest until the end of time, essentially. And just a whole bunch of money. And these characters are fighting essentially to have this money. And we hear throughout the story each of the characters and their backstories. And it's really interesting. Armstrong, she wants the money for essentially for her family. As we learn a little bit about her story, where her home planet is pillaged by war, and alien races come down to her race and essentially try to enslave her race. Half of her family are on the run, and half of her family are on hiding, and she doesn't know if any of them are even alive. And you really get the feeling of that. The Susan Lynn's performance really gives her this fun, enigmatic character who will play by fair, who she will play by the books. She does help the Doctor. Well, she doesn't help, but she agrees with the Doctor and Espo to take this boat to get onto the other side of the lake. But Espo, on the other hand, he has this kind of everyone's got to protect themselves. And as first of all, we start off thinking he's just a gritty, downbeat, monster, essentially. However, we do get this really dramatic scene in this boat where he goes into this backstory in which his mother told him to climb a tree, and then he's told him to jump. And he's like, don't worry, I'll catch you. So he jumped, only for her to then to step aside and let him fall and break part of his bones. And she said, you've learned something. Never trust anybody. And that basically explains his hard hysteria. And what I really like about this story is that he's basically built up to be this hard hysteria character. Basically a character who's like, right, it's either me or them. But he's a character who also constantly is relying on other characters. He gets injured, he gets other characters to help him. He can't get the boat fixed. He gets the Doctor gets Ryan and Graham to fix the boat. And it's just like each trial that they come to, he's completely useless in a sense. But he has this kind of aesthetic in his mind, and it doesn't shift. And it really frustrates the Doctor in this. And each trial basically sums up a different aspect of the element of the story. First of all is the boat. Very simple scene, very simple idea where we have the characters basically trying to work on the boat. I really love, there's a great moment here, and I don't think a lot of people talk about this. There's a scene where Graham and Ryan are talking about like their being a granddad and stuff, and like how they fixed the boat and stuff. And then after they've kind of discussed their emotional trauma about losing Grace in the previous episode, and it's like, right, okay, maybe we do actually have maybe it's not a engine, maybe it's a battery and it's powered by solar panel. it cuts to the Doctor, seemingly in position, like as if she was hearing conversation, but we never we know for sure, and it gives the Doctor, even though it's just like one shot, it gives the 13th Doctor this element which, if you look hard enough, is clearly there, where we have there's a lot of scenes in it where she's dawdling, she's dabbling around, she's speaking very witty, when she's very comfortable, but when she's outside of the box from the other characters, when she is essentially a viewer to our other characters, she kind of steps back and she has this kind of almost, what's the word? But she basically looks upon it and she's basically like studying them. Like in the scene, she basically let them, seemingly watch them from an unpreserving eye to get a grip on her characters. Very similar to that scene in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, where you see her watching Ryan very stillishly as he's trying to ride his bike. I just love these shots and I love these moments. And it really gives the 13th Doctor a little bit more depth than what people credit to her, because Jodie Whittaker is also very energetic here. They do the Vesusian grip, which she does. I think she does it with her pinky, if I remember correctly. And she goes into detail about that and how and it's a lot of fun. But then she also have these great moments where, after Espo mentions his backstory, the Doctor just quietly says to him, "She was wrong," and leaves it like that. But she's also, ready stuff. There's a great scene where Ryan has to climb up a ladder, and the Doctor's just kind of comforting him. He's like, "You know what? You're very brave to be here." But yeah, there's just so many great moments, beats like that. The second plot of the story, the second little arc, shall we say, is probably my least favourite. However, I do think there's some really great moments, which is the sniper bots. Essentially, they go into this this arena, this building, and basically they're not going to get there in time. I completely forgot to mention why the Doctor and her characters are following these characters. Essentially, we learn by Lynn that they need to get to the Ghost Monument to win this prize. And the Ghost Monument, as the Doctor learns, is the TARDIS. And it's absolutely beautiful shot of the hologram, and she's looking at it, and her face just says it all. But anyway, back to the sniper bots. It's a very short thing, and it's one of those things where I think it should have been longer, where they go to this building of a seemingly abandoned robots, and then one of them are triggered by Espo somewhere else, and they all start going around firing, and the Doctor has to cover and learn. And now the Doctor is stuck basically with their companions, and they're basically agreeing to each other. It's like, right, we need to get guns, we need to fight back. We can't fight with weapons. And it's kind of like that justification of, right, we justify fighting guns. They're fighting guns at us. And Ryan gets a gun, and he's like, right, I've got Call of Duty. And he shoots, and he's having so much fun just destroying these robots. And he thinks he's doing so well. And he's like, yes, come on. And then all the robots get back, and he's like, no. And he realizes that the weapon's now out of loaded, and he's like, oh no, I'm completely useless. So he legs it back with this joyfully legs it back. And he's just like, that was a very stupid plan, made it worse, but I absolutely enjoyed it. And the Doctor then proclaims, after they be cornered, the Doctor's like, right, you had the right idea of picking up something from the robot, but you picked up the wrong thing. And she uses her brain, she uses her intelligence to emit an EMP, boom, and destroy all of the sniper bots for them to reboot, and gives them now characters some time, leading into the scene where she's like, what'd you say? Brains beats bullets any day. That is the Doctor. That is just a really cool moment. I really wish that we had a bit more of establishing shots of the EMP in the sniper bot, because it just does kind of seem like coming out of nowhere. But the scene's ideas do come across in the episode, and the point it's trying to make does fit into the narrative. The third story arc, which is seemingly the last one, is the story around these cloths which have seemingly come to life, and they can wrap around people and they choke them. They can also seemingly read minds and basically taunt people into doing selfless acts so they can go and attack them. I believe, I can't remember what they're called. The Remnants, I believe they're called. And in this plot, the Doctor and our characters are in these tunnels, and the Doctor learns by looking at these markings by the scientists that genetically created these creatures, that essentially everything on this planet was created to serve an alien race that they have been enslaved by. They have been enslaved by the, what are they called? The Stenza. They're called the Stenza. The alien race that Tim Shaw belongs to, from The Woman Who Fell to Earth, who I forgot in that episode. They're called the Stenza, and that seems to be a teaser that they are going to become a regular thing. I did remember watching this episode first time and be like, oh god, this is not going to be the story arc, the Stenza, especially when you consider that the first episode seemed to build them up when really they were great. I think it was a great one-off character, but nothing that could have sustained a series. Looking back now on that element, because it doesn't really run until the very end of the series where that plot arc gets reintroduced, I'm okay with it here. But that's not the only plot element in the story which gets connected into future episodes, as our characters find themselves on the surface, and basically the remnants come out and they taunt our characters. They're voiced by Ian Gallagher, who would go on to play a character in Series 12 as a really iconic character in Series 12, which we'll get onto when we talk to that. But he just has this really cool voice. He just has a really cool voice. And he basically proclaims that the Doctor, we can see your fears. We can see that you are unsure of yourself, this new body. But you're also concerned about the timeless children. But wait, you don't know about the timeless children. There's a secret even from yourself, the timeless children, which of course ties into a much larger story arc within the canonicity of the 13th Doctor. We won't get too much into detail about that here. However, I remember watching this for the first time, and you know me, you've heard my opinions, and like I remember being like, oh god, please no. When Series 11 finished, and it's like, that was nothing, that was just like a nice like reference, like this kind of little mystery that was just like left hanging. I actually really liked that. Like, it didn't need explaining, just leave it up to the fans' imagination. How cool would have that been if they just left it like that? But no, the fan base demanded we need story arcs. Chris Chibnall took this story arc and pushed it into Series 12. At least that's what I think it happened anyway. And our characters quickly defeat them by this match that Espo had. But he didn't come up with the idea. He stated earlier on in the episode he has this cigarette that he's been saving for years, and it's self-light, and he just needs a click of his fingers, and the Doctor uses that to destroy the remnants. So they go to the location of the ghost monument. However, the tents of Lynn is there, and our characters start bickering with each other. Armstrong is like, right, I'm going now. I'm going to just leave you here. Look, you're injured, you're bruised. You're not going to win this. I'm healthy, I'm fit, and I need the money to protect my family. I'm just going to take it. And they argue and they bicker and everything, argument, but the Doctor comes up with this idea of them joining at the same time. Lynn doesn't like this idea at first, but then acknowledges them as joint winners, spreading the winnings half between both of them. However, he leaves the Doctor, Yaz, Graham and Ryan on the planet on their own, and with no seemingly location of the TARDIS, and the Doctor gets bound down. Only for a whistling sound, a beautiful hum, as she uses her sonic screwdriver to try and get the TARDIS to hold on, and it finally dematerializes. And this is the first shot of the TARDIS in the 13th Doctor era, as we get introduced to a brand new interior. And wow, the shots here, the way how she like holds onto the TARDIS, and that iconic shot where she's walking to the TARDIS and the camera is like panning around, almost like something from Lord of the Rings. It's so cool. And I also like the shots that they use inside the TARDIS. She's just mouth opened as we see the wall at first, just have her looking, and we just get a glimpse of this really strange, ominous wall. As she comes back, we see the TARDIS with this crystallizing, yellowy, orangey theme with some little blue lights here and there. I really like the way it's shot. I really do love, like the directing in this scene is absolutely gorgeous. The TARDIS design is a bit hit and miss. I do really like these big pillars that come around it. It's very similar in style to, in terms of the idea of having pillars that connect to the TARDIS of sorts. It's very similar to the Doctor number 9's and 10's TARDISes. However, the way they're positioned, it means that one camera angle is omnipotent, and you get this really awkward thing with the pillars covering the TARDIS console. The TARDIS console itself is way too chunky. The actual like they actually have like a crystallizing stature which does the rotating thing. It's the first time since the revived era where since the classic era actually, where it's not touching the ceiling. But it's really thick for some reason. It just looks really odd. However, I do love the colours. I do really like that really strange wall. It's probably the coolest wall of the Doctor's TARDISes. That's a really strange. I love the entrance to the door. But yeah, and the colour palette gives the TARDIS a very high budgeted, very aesthetic look. And that's what the episode's really building up to, is the appearance of the TARDIS, as the Doctor promises to get them home, but also revealing that it is a time machine. And so the story ends with the Doctor promising to take our characters home in her TARDIS. Overall, the Ghost Monument improves with age, in my opinion. It's a story which has these hidden little details, not like hidden details, but has these little moments, little beats, which really have these really great character moments, really character beats that get you invested in the characters. The issue, I think, is, though I do really like the story, is trying something new, and I think it should be applauded for. I don't think that the idea of this story works here. I think this episode should have been longer. Each segment of the story feels way too small to be significant. Sometimes the problems, like the sniper bot specifically, seem to just get solved like that, with only really the remnant, the cloth creatures, only really being one that has a proper build-up and a resolution to its story. But it is a very unique story. It's something which I think I highly look forward to whenever I rewatch it now. But it could have been a lot better. I think it could have been a lot better. Maybe they should have had at least picked one storyline, or at the least have an episode each to each dedicated storyline. That would have been really cool. But anyway, that's not what we got. We got this story instead, which is good for what it is, but it could have been better. For what it is, really, really good. Highly recommended. So anyway, that's the Ghost Monument. So join me next time when the Doctor and her companions are trapped in the past. They meet iconic figures of history which time has forgotten about to an extent, as two of the companions actually, just by being there, sadly becomes a issue for the Doctor in her escapade for adventure and to save the day. So join me next time for Rosa, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!